everyone. I'm Marilyn, CEO and founder of Cosmic Centaurs, and the host of our webinar today about the inclusion of women and parents in the workplace. As a mompreneur who recently discovered the complexities of actually being a parent, and particularly, a primary caregiver, let's put it this way, to a very young baby, I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate Mother's Day than to push that agenda further. Most women perform, as we know, substantially greater amount of the household chores and childcare responsibilities. It means that they perceive their day as having a double shift. And I certainly have learned the hard way what that feels like in the last few months. And yet many studies show that the motherhood penalty is still very real. And it's a term that refers to the variety of disadvantages that working mothers face: lower salaries, higher chances of rejected job applications. And in fact, women's incomes drop by about 30% after giving birth for the first time, and they never catch up. On the other hand, men get a bump in pay once they become fathers. So it's not surprising that while 75% of expecting moms say they plan to go back to work after giving birth, 43% of them end up leaving the workforce. Fortunately, though, we're seeing an increasing number of companies trying to change things around and be more inclusive towards mothers and parents in general. And today we want to explore further how organizations can be more parent-friendly and women-friendly through their purpose and culture, and how that positively affects their bottom line. And Liz Sen is here with us today to explore this topic together. Liz is an executive director based in APCO Worldwide's Dubai office. She is a passionate communicator and a results-oriented business leader with over 2 decades of experience in strategic communications and advocacy. In her current role, as a strong and committed champion for gender parity, she heads APCO MENA's gender practice. She's also responsible for the region's marketing strategy and initiatives. With a deeply embedded network across APCO and among high-profile industry stakeholders, Liz has led several award-winning client assignments involving demanding mission-critical mandates, organizational change management, as well as sectoral marketing and public relations on a global level. Liz, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Marilyn. What an apt day to have this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. So, those who know me know that I love myself a good definition, and I like to start off, conversations with ensuring that we are all talking about the same thing. So my first question to you is, what is an inclusive workplace?
For me, an inclusive workplace, definitions apart, is a place where you can bring your complete personality into the workplace and still feel comfortable about it. So you have different identities, you have different roles that you play. If you can come in as a mother, if you come in as an Indian woman, if you can come in as perhaps, whatever that definition might be, if you can come in as yourself and still thrive in an environment, that for me is an inclusive workplace. All your diversity, all your intersectionality, you should be able to bring into the workplace and still feel comfortable about it.
Yeah, I really love that definition. And also because a lot of the times we tend to focus, diversity and inclusion around, what I would call phenotype. So what is visible on the outside, the color of your skin, your gender. But there's a lot of value in also bringing to the table diversity of experience, of culture, that may be less visible on the outside, but are equally important. So I really love that you've kind of broadened the perspective of what that can mean.
Exactly.
Now, the downside of, let's say, the discussion around diversity and inclusion is that we see a lot of companies just ticking the box. A couple workshops here and there. Let's talk about inclusivity, diversity, gender parity. Maybe it's International Women's Day, and that's the one day where we highlight these things. But we don't really, we don't have a lot of amazing examples. And I'm hoping you can share a few of how organizations can really embed inclusion into their DNA and ways of working. And what are some of the initiatives that you've seen that you think are really successful in creating that space?
For me, Marilyn, it starts with leadership modeling. If you have a company that is being led by a leader who's empathetic, who has a focus on diversity and inclusion, then that organization probably will walk the talk of that entire journey. One of my favorite examples is how IBM has done it. IBM in 1995 figured out that they were creating an environment where people were equal, but they were not embracing the differences between their people. So they structured it in a way, and they made it a business imperative. They said, if we have to sell to the disabled people, we have to have disabled people with us, working with us. And if you have to sell to the American Mexican community, then you have to have Mexicans working with them, right? So that's the way they structured it. But when there isn't a business imperative, that's when you need to ask the question, how can I benefit from diversity? How can I have a much more robust employee experience plus customer experience? So supposing you were not selling to a diverse group of people, would you still benefit from diversity? That's the question you need to answer and keep it at the center of your strategy. Saudi Arabia, for instance, right now has a massive opportunity. They are trying to talk to the world at large, and they're creating infrastructure, which is amazing infrastructure. And once they have that infrastructure in place, they will need to have populations from all around the world come and enjoy those benefits and enjoy those facilities that they're creating. So to me, those are the examples and those are the organizations which are creating a fundamentally appreciative culture. And culture is really soft, and culture is really fathom. In fact, we did a survey, we supported a survey for the GCC Board of Directors Institute, and we were talking about culture. It is integrated into the vision and mission of the organization, but it is not really audited properly. The only measure is the employee engagement surveys. And if you begin to put structure behind it, then you can actually analyze what are the cultural measures. So over to you, Marilyn.
Yeah, I think that's, what you say is very beautiful. Make sure that it aligns with your business strategy and that you don't think of it as just like an extra nice to have over here on the side, because anything that's considered a nice to have gets dumped the second there's a bit of constraints on the organization. And the second piece that you highlighted is also being able to measure its impact very clearly and making sure that leaders are, spearheading the approach and setting up the right culture. I wonder, I often say like a lot of the burden always rests on leadership and management, but how can we make sure that the burden of inclusivity is shared by all inside a company? How do we make sure that we involve employees in their day-to-day to create that space, be it for their peers or, as you so aptly said, for their customers as well?
Now, I cannot emphasize the role of leadership enough. However, once it's translated into manager levels and mid-management level and employee level, you have to practice it. Diversity is a very difficult managing diversity is a very difficult management function, because when you bring in a very diverse group of people, they're bringing in their personalities. I used to have this challenge early on as a young manager in 2013 and 2014 in Dubai, and we had at that time I think 29 different nationalities. When you sit to delayer the racial mix that you have in an office which has so many nationalities, what you begin to analyze and understand is that, yes, not all of us are football fans, not all of us are, sort of music fans, and not all of us are watching the same kind of movies, not all of us enjoy the same kind of food, but life experiences continue to be the same. And you have to bring it to that level of empathy and inclusion and humility. Now, what I tend to do is, even in our orientations, APCO's orientation for new employees has a very important tenet, and I want to give this as a tip to everybody. We lay down 3 different talking points in our introductions. The first talking point is, what are you planning to do? which is your job description. The second point is, what is your family about? Right? So then you have an additional talking point. The third talking point that we emphasize is, what are your hobbies? Yeah. And the fourth one is, what are the issues that you care about? Now, if you have those as the foundational pieces of your relationship and you've been openly able to share that, then you're creating an inclusive culture. And it is expected from all APCO employees and in interactions with even customers that you bring in that humaneness into that conversation, right? And then that begins a relationship which is a little bit more about you and I connecting as human beings as opposed to you and I connecting as professionals.
Yeah,
and that makes a world of difference.
You're speaking to my heart right here, because actually a lot of the work that we do, while it's very important to relate it to strategy and bottom line and processes and systems and ways of working, I think fundamentally, if you do not work on the human relationship of your community of employees, then you're really missing out. And actually, a lot of our work is in fact around, we're working here to fix a process, but we know that it's not about the scientific side of the process, that it's about the social side of human interaction and connection, and what you're talking about, which is mutual knowledge. And we know from numerous experiments that even people who start off hating each other or having a premise of judgment towards the other, as soon as they start to learn their personal stories, as soon as they start to connect with them, you mentioned a few, whether it's the hobbies or your family, it could be your values, it could be something as simple as your favorite snack. But the second you start to have these intimate details for someone, the distance and the judgment and the lack of understanding that you have towards these individuals disappears, and we are able to connect in a very meaningful and fundamental way. And just a couple of things here I want to mention for our audience, and maybe the team can plug them in. We had an amazing discussion with Dr. Vinika Rao about inclusivity in the workplace in our conference, and maybe we can link to that. But also Jonathan Yao came and gave us a framework, in fact, for how to understand our points of difference and commonalities, which is how to explore the multifaceted aspect of our identities that we bring to the workplace and which ones we want to interact through. And last but not least, we've designed an entire game. I don't know if I gave you a copy actually.
Yes.
We've designed an entire game, in fact, just to promote that connection at a human level amongst peers and colleagues. So that is such a very close topic to my heart, and I'm very grateful that you brought it up. We have a question here from the audience. We talked about how to integrate different cultures, how to integrate diversity. It is Mother's Day after all. And I can share maybe just from a personal experience, and I know you and I spoke about it when we were talking about office designs, which is, I'm a mother of a 9-month-old. I have made the choice, and I've been, lucky to be able to be a breastfeeding mom. And I have experienced, as an entrepreneur and a mother and an employee, I've experienced the worst environments possible in order to be able to maintain this personal choice of mine. I cannot tell you how difficult it is to do that in the airport, at a conference hall. Dubai is very lucky in public spaces like malls and so on. You'll always be able to find a private room that is female only. But, in my various experiences throughout the world over the last few months, I mean, I know why women give up. You know what I mean? Like, I can see it. I'm always 2 inches away from giving up because it's just so hard. And so we have a question from the audience here about making workplaces specifically mother friendly, and how, whether is it through flexibility? Is it through the design of the spaces where we operate? Talk to us about your thoughts around that.
Flexibility is the number one. And now that we have figured out that remote working is equally effective, flexibility is the number one opportunity for young mothers. In addition to that, you need to have, again, the cultural tenets within your organization. You need to be able to figure out whether that organization is able to be supportive of you as a mother. There are cultural barriers sometimes which you can perceive only after you join an organization where it might be very difficult. So you need to have that understanding whether that organization is able to do it. Now, the physical infrastructure as well is important. The argument that a lot of organizations tend to make is it's expensive for them to maintain the facilities of for young mothers. I continue to believe that the opportunity cost of losing mothers is extremely high. Employees who leave the workplace is extremely high. For me, I feel like if you have young mothers in your environment, you need to provide for lactation rooms. You need to have absolute flexible environment. You need to have team cultures and team managers and team leads trained up to provide that additional level of support or provide an additional level of resourcing that is required to give the young mother the flexibility. It is a journey, and it is a journey of at least 1.5 years for mothers to stabilize their young ones, and we need to be able to provide that opportunity. And Marilyn, you're absolutely right. And this is the reason what excites me about Saudi. Saudi is building everything new. They can integrate all of these facilities into their workplaces and to their common places.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, if I can be like self-critical for a second, before I became a mom, I really didn't understand the burden of being a mother and of being able to contribute to the company. I also didn't understand how productive mothers are. Now that I've, you talked about the loss of losing mothers. Now that I've become a mom and I understand how much more productive I am because I don't have time. So I don't linger on things, like I always joke that, a year ago, I might have spent 45 minutes choosing an icon for one of my presentations. I don't do that anymore. I don't have time for this. But actually, I've become much, much more productive if you count the hours that I do spend working than I used to be before, precisely because I need to plan for having slack in my day to take care of my daughter. And I also didn't understand previously how difficult the experience of being a mom, of being away. And I'm really lucky. I get to work from home and I get to walk out of this room and see my daughter at any moment. And even then, when I'm busy and I'm locked into meetings and it's back to back, the level of guilt that I have, and I'm the closest possible to my child as I could be. And I think that, I'm a big advocate of, design or design thinking, or what is also called human-centric design. And I think that something as small as spending the day with a working mom and really understanding everything she has to go through, your point about lactation, mothers who choose to breastfeed add about 8 hours a day of managing this process, especially in the early months of their children. That's a whole other full-time job. And we don't talk about these things at all. And we just, mothers come back to work after they're done with maternity leave and we're like, welcome back. Here's everything you should be doing. Here are all your tasks. Goodbye.
What is also essential, and I have learned this by looking at younger mothers now who have technology supporting them. I feel like having employee resource groups and having mothers who are coming back into the workplace with absolutely fantastic technology at their home. They have cameras which are watching their children and their sort of nannies, and they have all this going on the side, on their desks, and they're still connected to their motherhood. There's so much to learn from young mothers and how enterprising they are. So if there are sharing sessions that can be organized between employees in the formats of employee resource groups, that is also extremely helpful.
Yeah. You know what? I really echo that point. And I feel like what got me through the first few months of motherhood is actually other mothers jumping in to offer their personal experience, their advice, their support. And without that group and that community, I think I would have had a much more difficult experience, especially, in a place like Dubai where you are less likely to be around your family. you know, so
Yeah.
you might be just on your own and having to deal with all of this. And the sisterhood aspect of that community was so helpful to me in very simple ways, but very essential ones.
Let's
Another,
not
you know,
forget,
yeah,
let's not, I have to add, let's not forget the paternity aspect of it. Fathers have to have that additional understanding as well. I've had fathers come back into the workplace after 2.5 days of their wives delivering, and their reason for coming back into work is, we can't get any sleep, the mother-in-law and the mother will take care of the baby. And I'm like, go back, you have paternity leave, go back and be in the house, understand what this is about, because you as fathers are also managers. You have female employees with you who might become mothers, so understand the dimension. So paternity is an absolutely important, and I have seen how men change after they become fathers.
so
That
true.
journey is also important, and we need to take time for that.
Yeah, and not having that partnership at home makes it hard for everybody. Actually,
Exactly.
we also have a question from the audience around maternity and paternity leave. You know, there are countries, by the way, including the UAE, where still the maternity and paternity leave periods are relatively short. You know, at least the ones mandated by the government. You know, one question from the audience is, how can we encourage leaders and business owners to implement more pro-parent policies at work?
One of the things that, if you are working in an organization, I would encourage you to probably take these steps. Yeah. The SDG 5 pledge is provided. You can sign that by being a part of the Gender Balance Council. 56 organizations have signed that. And it is irrespective of the size. The smaller organizations have signed it, bigger organizations have signed it. It's a club. It's a club of organizations that want to do good by their women. You need to belong, encourage your organization to belong to that club. That's the starting point. Once you have that starting point, then you can manage many other steps. So for instance, we are a part of the Gender Balance Council, and we are taking many, many initiatives to ensure that people are understanding the need for gender equality and gender parity measures within the office. Now, APCO, and sorry, Marilyn, I'm going to plug a few things here because it is important. We have to make a journey ourselves. And the way that we are making it is that there is a campaign that you will see shortly, which supports he for she, as in we are getting men who have done, who are supporting gender initiatives, and they will be spotlighted in our campaign. We have about 7 organizations which talk about what are the measures that their leadership teams have taken for gender parity. So when you belong to that club, you are already seeing role models around you. The second thing that we're doing is that we are working very closely with an accounting organization that is helping us understand the cost of gender equality. What happens is CFOs and CEOs, when they begin to see that the cost of maternity and paternity leave is in fact negligible, and they see it as soon as they see, it's a very big mental block. But when they see that change, then they begin to understand, okay, the employee value proposition is so high that these costs are negligible. And the cost of retention is lower when you have great policies. So you have to build that argument in that way, and then you see slowly but surely these policies become better.
Yeah, I actually want to just share a personal experience to echo what you're saying. One of the companies that I joined, which is a big regional group, in the past, when I joined them, their maternity leave was the 45 days that is provided in the UAE by law, and I did just that. I worked with I found it appalling when I joined. I was like, how is this a thing? And I wasn't even in a moment of my life where I was looking to be a mother. I just thought that's not fair in general, regardless of my own personal situation. And so I worked together with HR and accounting to calculate the added cost of increasing maternity leave, in fact, of doubling it. And to your point, when the leadership team saw what the cost was, they enacted it immediately because they realized that it was affordable compared to the loss of staff and the cost of either disengagement or departures, the cost of needing to recruit and upskill replacements. It was a very swift and immediate action that they doubled the maternity leave right there and then. So I can attest to what you're saying. It does work. You just have to be an advocate and a campaigner and do the math. And then show companies that it is in their best interest, and good leaders will take that action, hopefully very fast. So I can only echo that. And I think another good thing to mention here, and we did interview Layla Al-Hassan about this, who established this for the Early Childhood Authority in Abu Dhabi. But there is in the UAE, at the very least, a parent-friendly label, which is a reward for organizations that adopt parent-friendly policies early on in terms of flexibility, paternity and maternity leave, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a really great guideline for what is needed to establish. Like, we went through it ourselves as Cosmic Centers to apply. And it tells you, like, by the way, this is how many days you should provide. This is the kind of flexibility that you should have. And it's a great guidebook, in fact, in transforming an organization into a parent-friendly organization.
I want to say that the Early Childhood Authority did a great job of the parent-friendly label. It's very difficult for the organizations to get it. Only 6 of them have it. But just the rigor of submission and, again, the understanding. So it's that journey that you're making, even while, remember, I mean, my analogy for that is, remember, if you're applying for a scholarship to one of the schools or colleges, it's that sort of a rigor. And just that process of doing that work gives you so much insight.
Exactly. And I think going through it is an educational process. Doesn't matter if you get it or not. If your intention is truly to build a more, if you're just applying for the label, then whatever. But if your intention is truly to learn how to build a more parent-friendly workplace, then applying for it and reapplying, and you get feedback, even if you don't get selected. You get feedback on your submission. You get ideas of what you can do to further improve, parent-friendly conditions. So in that sense, it's truly like investing in educating your organization about what needs to come next and next and next. And I think, as you say, they've done a really beautiful job of creating that engagement and that path towards more parent-friendly organizations. Earlier we spoke a little bit about the importance of companies understanding what is the business case for investing in diversity and inclusion. We know a lot of these numbers that usually come up. For example, companies that have more diverse leadership are 25% more likely to have above average profitability. I want to talk as well about how we can support women, not just in being in the workplace, but in attaining those leadership positions. Sadly, it's an age-old discussion. I would have hoped, when I was 20, looking forward to like now in my late 30s, I would have hoped that by now that was no longer a question we needed to ask. But the pandemic has, really set us back in terms of our access to leadership positions. What's your perspective? What are your thoughts on quotas? What's your view on how we can make that work?
For me, when I look at that, the challenging aspect of women on boards and women in leadership rooms and meeting rooms and C-suite, it's a journey again that has to be fully supported by men. That knowledge and understanding and that appetite for women in the leadership room is absolutely important. I remember attending a conference by Mishal Kanu, and he spoke. He's a very firm advocate of gender policies, and when he spoke, what I took from that conversation is that women and men bring different qualities into the meeting room. A very distinct level of empathy, very distinct level of soft skills, a very long-term view. By the way, women make long-term decisions as opposed to men. The risk appetite is lower. However, that is better for the organization. They create an environment of inclusion just by being there. So all of those factors are the soft factors that add up into the conversation of having women on boards and women in, especially now with the sustainability aspect and ESG aspects of the business having a spotlight, having an importance. What can you do? And this is a very difficult conversation. Quotas are absolutely important. Enforcing those quotas are important. Quotas in historically have had an important aspect. If the if you take any examples of quotas working in the past, they've all happened because somebody, a lawmaker, decided that, I mean, just take the example of emiratization. I was in a conference today about emiratization, and the support that emiratization is getting is because leaders are now looking at those opportunities without the inherent bias that they carried earlier. When you look at it without that bias, you are able to absorb. So, see, look at the two forces working together. There is the emiratization law now, and there are sort of what they call contribution fees for not adhering to the numbers, and there is now leadership intention. When these two come together, it makes a huge difference. So the interesting stories in history are such a great. I mean, if you look at the World Economic Forum rankings of countries, you have 3 countries which are on top. These are all European countries, way up in Norway and Iceland and Finland, right? These countries made a big difference. But the surprising candidate in that top 10 list is Rwanda. And when you look at, yeah, it is. And when you look at Rwanda, and what they did is that they had laws that supported the choice of women political leaders. And this is the reason why they're up there in the top list. So I am fully supportive of having board members support a quota system for their organizations and ensuring that hiring women and retaining becomes a KPI for CEOs and KPI for HR managers. 100%.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know a lot of people don't like quotas. They give arguments like, if you get to the top because there was a quota, do you really, have the capabilities? Are you perceived as having them, and so on? But I'm a firm believer in quotas as well, and you've given us so many proof points for that. Because removing the topic of gender or race or any other discussion is a beautiful concept, but you only do it when you create role models like that. We all saw the reaction, of the Oscar winner who recently won. I forgot her name now, but of Asian origin, Michelle.
Yeah.
What that did for people, representation matters, and quotas allow us to have representation, and we can go from there and hopefully one day no longer require them, but they are important at first. And I just want to relay a small story that when you were talking earlier about what women bring to the table in organizations, it's a little anecdote that I really think is important. So in the aftermath of 9/11, the CIA commissioned Harvard to run research on trying to understand why they hadn't been able to, foil the terrorist attack. And that research kind of extended into all sorts of direction, but essentially the bulk of it was they would create teams of spies and teams of terrorists, and try to get them to, find out the plan before it got executed. And the teams of spies lost every single time. So the terrorists would win. And that kind of led to the invention of the concept of collective intelligence, because what they found is that there were some teams, they were not necessarily made from the smartest individuals, but they were able together as a team to raise the collective intelligence. And that was the only time where they were able to actually counter the attack. And further to that, the professor that led this continued to study this topic, and her name is, I think it's Anita Woolley, and later on, continued to discover that teams that have slightly higher majority of women, so we're not saying all women, but just a few more women than there are men, are actually those that have some of the highest collective intelligence scores. And why is that? Because women are socialized to integrate people. So they're socialized, you mentioned this at the very beginning of our conversation, to know about people's preferences and strengths, to know when to call on them, and to kind of raise the contribution of individuals inside teams. And so there is actual direct impact of integrating. I know the young kids don't like to talk about gender, and we're trying to remove the binary, but regardless of that, I think there's a lot of great stories and great proof points on the role that women can play in collaboration, in increasing collective intelligence, in making more balanced decisions, and in creating more sustainable businesses. And I think you've given us some of those proof points as well. And with that, Liz, we could talk about this for a while. I'm a very committed feminist. Today I was being very tame, but usually I'm very, very, much even more vocal than today. But with that, we're coming towards the end of our time together. I'm very grateful for our audience. I have a couple last rapid fire questions for you before we wrap up, if you're ready for that.
Absolutely.
All right. So I want you to finish those 2 sentences for me. Let's start with the first one. The first one is inclusive workplaces are ...
Inclusive workplaces are absolutely fantastic places of joy and of extreme productivity.
I love that. And I agree. I think happiness and productivity come hand in hand. And if anybody wanted some data, please call me. I have dozens of data points to show you that. What is the one quality that every leader must have?
Humility. For me, humility is important because humility allows you to learn. Humility allows you to learn from everybody.
Yeah.
And that process of learning in our workplace is fundamental.
I couldn't agree more with that. Curiosity is one of the values at Cosmic Centaurs, and you can't have curiosity if you think you know everything.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for those incredible answers, Liz. And thank you for taking the time to join us today and sharing your insights and your perspectives. And I see, a couple of reactions from the audience that have really found, what we've shared super insightful. And as always, a thank you to our attendees for tuning in and asking us amazing questions. This video will be available on our social pages, on YouTube, on our website. Our team at Cosmic Centaurs is constantly creating new content, webinars like this one, but also amazing articles and worksheets and things you can download to improve your ways of working. Please find us on our website, cosmiccentaurs.com, where you can also subscribe to our news. And we are a team of 6 women. So guilty of not having diversity the other way around. 3 mothers, and we'd be very happy if you guys come over to our website and subscribe. It'll be something to celebrate today. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, and see you soon.